Good morning from Vietnam. Thanks a lot for joining our Inside Sharing program and sharing your story, Dr. Lucy. We appreciate that a lot.
Thank you so much for inviting me along today, and thank you to your listeners for giving up their time.
Dr. Lucy, you do a lot of amazing things, and today we want to have you share your story with our audience. And in our great cultures, you've been here 12 years ago, right? A decade ago. So at least you know some short about our culture. It's going to be a great honor for our audience if we can have you to introduce about who you are and the works that you do. Would you please do that for us?
Thank you. So, yes, I am Dr. Lucy Hone. I'm an adjunct senior fellow at the University of Canterbury, and I'm also the co-founder and co-director of the New Zealand Institute of Wellbeing and Resilience. And so our mission at the Institute is population level wellbeing and resilience promotion, which effectively, in everyday speak, means we like to help people feel more empowered and better equipped to look after their own mental well-being and get themselves back on track, or continue to, cope with whatever life throws at them.
Wow. And especially during the 2020s, during the pandemic, the well-beings and resilience actually even needed more than ever, right? So thanks a lot for helping people to be more equipped and to to face challenges, to treat them better, and to be more resilient at what they do. And thanks a lot for
Thank
doing.
you. And in that period, we did offer a lot of free resources to the world. And I know that they were getting to people all over the world. And maybe we'll talk about that later. But my TED talk went viral during the pandemic because people were clearly looking for ways of thinking and acting to help them navigate those tough times.
Absolutely, we're gonna talk about that at a later time. At the beginning, let's travel time, right? When I was young, I wanted to be an astronaut, wearing like astronaut suit and jumping in other planets. I think that part of being an introvert to me, seems to have that dream. But life didn't give me any chance to doing that. So, Dr. Lucy, when you were young, what was your dream about yourself into the future, though?
So when I was young, I was born in London, and then when we were 8, we moved north of the city to the countryside, and I ended up spending a lot of time riding horses. And so my dream when I was really young was to be an international eventer, doing all that dressage, show jumping, and cross country eventing. And I haven't been on a horse for a few years now, but I do still spend a lot of time outdoors, and I think that really developed a passion for the outdoors in me and action sports.
Action sport. You still doing that now?
So I don't ride now, but I can show you the scars of my recent scars of my action sports. Is this going out on video or just audio?
Both. Yeah. Oh, did it hurt?
Yes, so I was doing a half marathon last weekend in the mountains close to where I live, and I fell over and it ripped all the skin off my arms, both
Oh,
arms and my hands.
oh.
So yeah, so I'm still out there. I love being out in the mountains, running, yeah, biking, yeah, walking, whatever I can do.
I hope that it will recover soon, and all the bruises and stuff gonna recover soon for you. All right, and from the childhood of dream of international adventures in sport and stuff to what you are doing now is really different, right? So tell us how everything started from the dream when you were young up into the point that you are doing what you're doing now, the global authority on resilience. Can you share that journey?
Yes, happily, thank you. It has been quite a journey, and I grew up in England and went to Edinburgh University as an undergrad and studied history. I studied particularly American secret intelligence and Russian literature and society were my two focuses in my last 2 years. So I don't know how I wasn't picked up for the intelligence services, but I definitely wasn't. And then when I left university, I ended up being a journalist, and I have always wanted to be a writer, actually. I don't know how young that dream started, but I am absolutely identify as a writer. And in times of great challenge in my life, I've always gone back to writing. I think it's how I make sense of the world, and me at my happiest and most engaged and most creative is when I am writing. So I ended up being a journalist and wrote about all sorts of different things for the best part of 20 years. We moved to New Zealand when we had our first two children. They were 1 and 3 when we decided to immigrate to New Zealand in search of a better life for our family, to get away from the stresses of living in London and in England. And so we came here to live, and I carried on with my journalism. But if I look at what I was writing about in those years, it's actually very obvious to me that my passion for resilience and understanding what enables people to live a life well lived has actually been with me throughout my adult life. Because the first piece I ever had published in Harper's and Queen magazine in London in, 1994 was about the dangers of mollycoddling children. It was called Paranoid Parenting. And it was getting people to understand that if you prevent your children from experiencing any form of setback, challenge, or change, then actually you are preventing them from being resilient, because we learn so much from our failures and our setbacks. So that was the first piece I ever had published in 1993, and I was, whatever I was, 23, 25. And then I have written, in the next 20 years, I went and wrote stories about, I interviewed a grandma once who was training for her black belt in karate.
Oh, really?
I interviewed a Muslim woman who was doing a triathlon and was wearing her hijab while she was biking. And I remember writing an article about affluenza, the sickness of just wanting more and consumerism. And so it's interesting for me because when I look back at so many stories that I wrote as a journalist, they were driven by my curiosity to talk to people who had either had troubles in their own lives or had some outlandish goal and challenge that they had set themselves. And so I think that is there is definitely a picture there about that I've always been interested in this kind of content. And then my life changed in 2009 when I decided that I'd had enough of being a generalist, being a journalist who wrote about everything, and instead what I wanted to do was really specialize in resilience. So it was soon after the global financial crisis, and at that time it seemed to me that there was a lot of talk about resilience. You know, whether you picked up one of the news weeklies like The Economist or Time, or whether I listened to our national radio or the BBC, it seemed that we were being told that economies needed to be resilient and individuals and organizations needed to be resilient. And that got me thinking, does anyone really know what this word means? And it was that curiosity that sent me to the University of Pennsylvania, where I studied with Martin Seligman, who's probably the most famous psychologist still alive today. He's 80, yeah, just had his 80th birthday. So I travelled between New Zealand and Philadelphia to study my master's at UPenn in 2009, and that's when my academic study of resilience began, and I've been doing it ever since.
See, Steve Jobs was saying is that all the dots can only be connected backwards, right? And then if you look at everything that you're doing now, it all connected back to when you were young, the works that you do, the dream that you had, and look at the article
It's so
in
true.
1994 that you wrote about paranoia parenting, right?
Paranoid parenting. It's so true, because when I saw that Steve Jobs Stanford commencement address, that was the first time that made me trace those dots backwards to that first article I'd ever written. I thought, he is so right. And I truly believe that in life, that we can't see the future. We don't know what is around the corner. But when you look backwards, you can see how the events of your life and your strengths, your real passion for certain things, and the environment in which you were raised, there is so much how nature, nurture, and culture and opportunity and happenstance all come together to make who you are in this, day that we live in today.
Look at the global crisis, financial crisis back in 2008, 2009, right? And then you decided to go all in for, to learn more about resilience and be an expert on that. And I'm just curious about why you're curious about that and make yourself all into that game.
I think so I had listened to Martin Seligman on the radio one day, and he was being interviewed for his work in psychology, and in particular on learned optimism, which is what he had dedicated 30 years of study towards understanding whether being an optimist or pessimist was, the differences, and who was an optimist and who was a pessimist, and could we train people to be an optimist? And so I listened to him, and one of the things he said was that how important it is for us as individuals and families, teams, to understand our strengths. And he said, if you know your strengths and you use them every day in work, love, and play, then that leads to well-being. That is, you will enjoy your life better, you will feel good and function well, which is our definition of well-being. And it was a real moment for me that stopped me in my tracks, and I hadn't come across his work before. So it was because of his work that I went to the University of Pennsylvania, because at the time it was there were only two places in the world that I could study psychological well-being at the master's level, and the University of Pennsylvania was the world-leading program in resilience in particular, and resilience is what interests me. By then they had the Penn Resilience program, which they were rolling out into schools to teach students to be more resilient, and they were seeing some really good early results from the Penn Resilience program. But on top of that, when I arrived in Philadelphia in 2009 in the fall, they just picked up the contract to train all American soldiers to be as mentally fit as they traditionally have been physically fit. So again, it seemed to me that they were the academic department who were best equipped to teach me the way to take the best of science out of the ivory towers of academia and bring it to people in their everyday lives. And that, without a doubt, by 2009, that was my burning passion.
Wow. And then you spent years doing that, training the people, training organizations on well-being, on resiliences, right? And there's a lot of definitions about resilience these days. One person define differently to the next person. So we want to hear Dr. Lucy's own definition of resilience. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so actually my definition of resilience starts with my definition of well-being, which is what I did my PhD in. So my PhD was called Defining and Measuring Well-being. And so in a nutshell, we define well-being as feeling good and functioning well. So yes, it does have that hedonic side of it, the feeling good, the happiness bit. You've got to have that life satisfaction and positive emotions in your life. But it also has the functioning well part, which is so important and often overlooked. And by that, I mean that you've got a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, that you have autonomy, that you have supportive relationships, that you have a sense of hope and agency where you can actually influence your surroundings. So it's a long-winded way of saying it. That's well-being. So in my mind, and based on my academic study and from training 30,000 people last year alone, we say to people that resilience is about steering through whatever you are facing so that you can either get back to feeling good and functioning well, or you can continue to feel good and function well, whatever happens.
Well, so steering whatever we are facing with, then so that we can get back to what make us feeling good and functioning well, right? And
but it's important to note that it's either about getting back to feeling good and functioning well, or managing to maintain that, because there are times in your life when no amount of resilience thinking skills will make you feel good. And as I'm sure you know, in 2014, we lost our daughter. She was killed in a tragic car accident.
So I went about that.
So that's why my TED Talk went viral, I think, in 2020 during the COVID pandemic, because I am in this extraordinary position of being an academic researcher on resilience. And then in 2011, I lived through the Christchurch earthquakes for 2 years, which was significant. But actually in 2014, I had to apply those skills to an even more profound situation when our 12-year-old daughter, Abby, was killed in a car accident one Saturday afternoon in June. So, I feel very strongly about this, that resilience isn't about bouncing back, because you don't bounce back from the death of your daughter. It takes time and a lot of processing. So it's really important to me that people understand that resilience is about steering through whatever is facing you, doing whatever you can and whatever you need to today to either feel as good as you can and function well, or to get yourself back there in the long haul, because parental bereavement doesn't evaporate overnight. It takes a couple of years really to get your head around that, to learn to live with that loss. And so resilience in my hands is much more about giving yourself the time and patience and compassion to know that that can be a long journey.
Mm. And Dr. Lucy, I'm so sorry for bringing back the tragedy that happened, and I read about that, but I didn't, like want to, bring that story up in this conversation. It can carry some emotion.
It's important to bring that story up though, because a part of resilience is not about avoiding emotions. A resilient person experiences all emotions. There's nothing wrong with tears. There's nothing wrong with anger or jealousy or fear, but you don't want to get stuck in any one emotion. And if you do, that's when you should get help. And so in all of the work we do, because I run courses helping other people cope with loss now, that's much of the work I do. And I have a best-selling book called Resilient Grieving. So much of the work I do is helping people adapt to bereavement. And I think it's really important that we can have open and honest and sometimes emotional conversations around death and dying. And it's not something to avoid, and it's not something to feel awkward about, because everybody dies and everybody loses somebody they love. And so the more we can talk about it, the better equipped we will be when that moment comes for us.
And that is strange to a lot of people, because normally we tend to hold back on our own feelings, and if we want to show that how resilient we are, and in your definition we need to actually do in the reverse way of sharing and more opening to do that. So how can we take baby steps to really start to share how we feel and how to other people, though, Dr. Lucy?
It requires bravery, doesn't it? To open yourself up, to courageously say to your family or friend, hey, can we just talk about my daughter for a moment? Because I would really like to. And that was what I used to do. And it was strange, alien territory for me too. But I learned that the more I did it, the more I kept Abby in the conversation, and the more comfortable people would feel to talk about her. And then this is so important, because when we lose somebody who we love, we're all terrified that they'll be forgotten. So actually being able to talk about them and keeping an ongoing connection to those that you love and those who have died is absolutely a healthy way to grieve. And so that's what I would encourage anybody who knows a friend or a family member who's lost somebody, or a colleague at work, is to bravely say to them, I'd love to talk to you about your loved one, whoever it was they lost. Would you come for a coffee or a walk some day and just tell me about them and tell me about how you're feeling? And I'd just like to listen. And actually the best thing we can do for the bereaved is to let them tell their story and sit with them and listen. It's such an important thing to do.
Since you're saying so, Dr. Lucy, would you tell us a little bit more about Abby? We would love to listen.
You're so kind. And yes, so Abby was 12 years old and a little blonde, skinny, bubbly, gorgeous, generous, funny soul. She liked to dance and laugh. And she spent her life with her friends, playing at the beach, and her friends were everything to her. And looking back on it, she had a very good life. We live here on the beach in New Zealand.
Mm.
She walked to the local school down the road, and she knew everybody in her local community, and that was what was important to her. So I'm still friends with lots of her friends who are now 21. So it's a long time ago. You know, we're on 8 years this year. And I'm thrilled that I'm still friends with them because we do laugh about her. And sometimes in our social media, we use the hashtag Abby would have loved this. And I love, you know, that's fun. And I remember I always put a at the end of when I sign my name, you know, on an email or write a card and I write Lucy, I do 4 crosses for my husband and I and our 2 sons, and then I put an A at the end just to remind me and everyone that she's part of our family still. She's not here, but, you know, I am the mother of 3 and she will always be in my heart.
Definitely, she will always in your heart. And then even if she's not here anymore with us, she's somewhere, she's going to be happy seeing that all the works that you do
I have dedicated my life to her legacy, and so we do a lot of work around help supporting the bereaved. We don't do clinical work helping the bereaved who are really struggling with their grief so much that they need medical or clinical intervention. So I don't do one-on-one psychological training, you know, with people. But what we do instead is we try and give people tools that are based in scientific research to help them get back on their feet when they're ready to do that. So we get a lot of emails from people who have either read my book, Resilient Grieving, or watched the TED Talk, which is called 3 Secrets of Resilient People. And I talk about Abby in the TED Talk. And now particularly from the current course I'm running in 3 weeks is called A Better Way to Grieve. And so we run these short cohort-based courses that are proving really popular now, because when you're grieving, it's hard to sign up to an online course that might take place over, you know, 8 weeks. Instead, people seem to enjoy coming to work with us we run them Friday, Saturday, Sunday online, just for 2 hours each day. And that seems to work really well, because when you're grieving and your brain is exhausted and your heart is aching, 2 hours a day for 3 days is about as much as the bereaved can cope with. And so that has been a real breakthrough for me in terms of getting more of our approach to grief out there to more people in the world. And the feedback has been so good. People are writing to say to us that our approach to grief has been a game changer for them. You know, it is the one thing that has really helped them get back out of the black hole and re-engage with a meaningful life and to manage their emotions and relationships better, because that, more than anything else, is what people seem to want.
And one of the reason for that to me is because of the real experience, you know, from the one that delivering the program also. So if we join the program and it's all about academia, it's all about something that, you know, in the textbook written and then been trained again, and it's not going to be effective. But you've been there, you've been through the whole, you know, like mountain of emotions, and so you can use your own practical way, the way that, you know, helping you to go through you know, the process to train and to teach people. So it's more, you know, like authentic, it's more real, it's more connecting, right?
Yes, I think you're right. And I think while people have given me lovely feedback from my book, and I know that the content that is in the book really helps people get back on their feet, there's nothing like actually hanging out like we are now, live on Zoom and having direct access to myself and our team. You know, we often have great guests on those workshops, and we have really tailored them to being immediately helpful to the people in the cohort, so that they actually make that kind of breakthrough transformation that they so desperately are craving. So yeah, it's really been amazing work. I'm thrilled to be doing it and helping others.
Dr. Lucy, allow me to ask a question. When we were young, we seems to be in full body of emotions. We really enjoy it, and we're taking really good care for our well-being, our thoughts, our emotion. But then, what happened to us when we grow up, right? We lack of ability to taking well care for our well-beings. We don't share emotion anymore. What happened to us?
Well, I certainly show emotions all the time, and I would encourage all of your listeners to not be scared of their emotions and to understand that there are no bad emotions or good emotions. That being human, we need to experience all of these emotions. And yes, of course, when you feel sad or lonely, that is hard. But those emotional experiences are teaching you. They're actually provoking you to go and get the help you need. So, firstly, I want to say to people, don't be scared of your emotions. Listen to them. They are data. They are information messages telling you what you need to do. And without our negative emotions, we wouldn't stay alive very long, because they are what govern your stress response, your fight or flight response, which is so important for our survival. But the problem, as you so rightly say, is that when we become adults, we are so often bombarded with stresses that we can very often have our stress response dialed up to full volume the whole time, and then you have those intrusive thoughts. So it's exhausting, and it becomes hard for people as their mental health deteriorates to differentiate between accurate thinking and their perception of the world, which can be inaccurate. So it's tough being an adult in this day and age, isn't it? In 2022 we are right now, and that is, I think, because our bodies are designed to thrive in such different environments to those in which we live today. So every time you can get outside, get into the hills, get to the park, get to the beach, get to the lake, whatever it is for you, every time you can get back to nature, your body and brain will thank you for it. Every time you can get outside and move or catch up with a friend, these are the things that your body and brain so desperately crave. So I think, that shortcut of behaving more like our cavemen ancestors is really sage advice. Just get out, move as much as you can, lean into your relationships, and don't be scared of your emotions. I think because we do so much work with bereavement, we do often come across people who are scared of their emotions. But if you let yourself cry, it usually doesn't last that long. So I think that would be my challenge to people, is to let yourself express those emotions and see what happens.
Dr. Lucy, expressing, and then on the other end of the screen is the receiving end also. A lot of people are not really good at receiving like emotional feedbacks also, like myself. When I listen to somebody sharing about their emotions, and if it's a good emotion, it's really easy for me to interact and share it. But if it's like a little bit, like the personal and negative emotions that they've been feeling, they've been having, then I don't know how to respond to that in a proper way. So I'm not equipped for that. And yes, so if in your advice, how can we, best, like play our role at the recipient of the person, when we receive emotional feedbacks from others?
So the first thing to understand is that there is no proper way,
Mm,
and maybe that's what holds people back, is they think, I don't know how to do this. What if I do it wrong?
mm,
Well, actually, showing kindness, you are never going to go wrong.
mm,
So even if you are just standing there, sitting there, giving that person more time to express their emotions, and if you manage to sit with your own discomfort, but tell yourself that letting them experience their emotions and not stopping them from feeling those emotions by making them feel awkward or embarrassed,
mm.
then you are helping them. And if this is someone you care about, you want to help them, don't you?
Yep.
So it is something about learning to sit with your own discomfort, and also to understand that as much as we don't like it, suffering is part of life.
Mm,
Everybody struggles and suffers. It's normal. And yet I think we forget this. We live in an era of perfectionism where everybody thinks that they have to live this perfect life all the time and be happy all the time. And frankly, that's just BS. That's complete rubbish.
wow. So we have to learn to deal with discomfort when we listen to the and to that, and to act of kindness, right? Be there, just listen and show our sincere cares. And thanks for that, because a lot of time in the past I was trying to hide away from people if they, like when I know that they want to share emotion, just because I did not know how to respond to it in a proper way. I just feel that I might act a jerk, so it might hurt their feeling even more. And I thanks for sharing that, for the tips that can
So
help.
there is, repeat after me, there is no proper way.
And there is no proper way. Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
And if you are kind, you can't go too wrong if you're kind. And even if you say to them, I don't really know how to handle what you're going through right now, but I just want to be here for you. Is it okay if I just continue to sit with you?
Mm,
Or what do you need? What are you happy for me just to sit here with you
mm,
while you continue to cry? But to dial back your own awkwardness is a really brave step forward too.
mm. And Dr. Lucy, a lot of my audience are executives, manager, leaders, and stuff like that, and we have the belief that our learning, the textbooks that we've been learning about management, has a lot of areas for improvement, especially in the well-being and resilience like this, right? We were told from years of working that, leave your emotion at home and go to work and then focus into work, right? Then it seems doesn't work now, and so what should we as leaders do so that we can, like create that welcomeness for people to bring emotions to work, and like bring the whole self to work?
Yes, isn't it ironic that we used to be told that you had to be a heroic leader, and now we understand that actually the very opposite is true, and that if we look at, I think a good place to start is to look at the people who you think are amazing leaders, and you will instantly realize that they role model empathy and compassion and forgiveness. They might even role model vulnerability
Mm,
and are willing to share that they're not perfect and they don't have all of the answers all the time. So when we work with leaders, and I worked with 30,000 leaders alone last year, so I've spent a lot of time discussing exactly this with leaders. And we work with them around tiny noticeable things that they can do that show those people around them that they really do care, that they do have time for them. So you want to be an active listener to develop those high quality connections and to understand that all of the time you are investing in talking to even a single member of your team about their weekend or their family life or their culture, every time you give them, you will get that ROI. You know, it is absolutely the best thing we can do as leaders is to get to know your teams. And you can do that through tiny noticeable things like asking them how their weekend was, but actually then pausing and waiting for the answer and finding connections with them, validating their culture, showing them in the organizational practices of your organization that you value their culture. And that's why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important, because if you don't see leaders like you, how will you ever believe that they truly value your culture? So all of the research that we've been looking at recently just shows how damaging having a toxic manager is. And what employees want most is to feel trust, respect, compassion, kindness, and understanding, empathy from their leaders. And so as a leader, it's so vital to role model those things, to pretend that you're perfect and you've always got everything all going on, but to actually acknowledge sometimes that you too might need some help, and to make sure that you role model what you hope to see from your team. So if you want your team to go home at 5 o'clock, don't go home at 10 o'clock yourself. And if you want your team to avoid burnout by not being on their phones all weekend, don't WhatsApp them on a Sunday morning. So you have to walk the talk.
So thanks for sharing that. And I'm curious about this. You know, there's a fine line between sharing and oversharing. You know, because if we create the environment that we welcome people to share how they feel and stuff like that, and somebody might be oversharing too much information, and that might that might affect the people who are kind up to listen to their stories. So where can we draw that fine lines to make sure that we are not undershare, but that we are also not overshare at work, Dr. Lucy?
So I'm curious about this. I, in my own personal and professional life, think I've probably only experienced people oversharing in an irresponsible or damaging way. And so I am going to challenge you on this about how much that actually happens and how much that is something that leaders say because they are scared of being more vulnerable at work and sharing more. And maybe they're not even just scared, but they're completely out of practice and have never done it before, which is why they're scared. So I very rarely come across people oversharing. Have you got a good example of someone oversharing? I mean, I think it's something that people dread, but I don't think it happens very often, because most people in professional environments can very quickly pick up on the cues that they are getting back from their surrounding audience. And if what they're saying is inappropriate, then I think most people can pick up on that and switch tacts pretty quickly. So I think it's a bit of a wall that people hide behind. And as sharing is so important, and the more we get to know each other, the more resilient we can be as teams, because you and I both know that we can forge on bravely, strongly for so long with so many plates spinning above our heads and, performing well and doing so many different tasks. And yet, when it all gets too much, it is normally a friend or a colleague or a family member who says, whoa, I'm really worried about you. You've got too much going on and I'm starting to see the cracks here. So we are only as resilient as the strong supportive networks that we have around us. There is no such thing as individual resilience. It is all a collective capacity to help each other navigate tough times. And I'm willing to bet that you, like me, when you got close to the edge of really being stressed and burnt out at work, or when something's gone wrong in your life, it is your friends, family, colleagues, your community networks that really come to your aid and support you and cushion you in that time. So it's absolutely critical that we understand that every time we have these engaged conversations with our colleagues, where every time you give a colleague more time, you are building your collective resilience as a team.
Thanks for sharing that. When I wrote my second book, it's called A Jar of Life in Vietnamese, right? We have a chapter called don't dump your trash. Don't be a trash bin, translate to Vietnamese language. Because I think in our culture, people shares a lot of, a lot more negative news compared to positive news, right? And if you have, if we spend time to listen to one conversation, and then it's gonna carry that over and over and over. So, and then that particular chapter, I was sharing that sometimes when we overshare your emotional feeling, you keep having it repeatedly lived in your life, right? And the people, they deserve a lot more different things also. If you can share the positive stories, share more. And instead of keep dumping your wrong story and your feelings, your negative things, whatever happened to your life repeatedly on the life of other people. So you make me going home carry that burdens of not be able to help, not being able to help to solve it for you, because the advice that you gave to some people, they don't take it for to do something about it, but they keep sharing and repeatedly. That's not good at all.
No, and there is a really robust psychological theory called social emotional contagion theory. And without a doubt, how you show up in your everyday life, whether that's at work or at home, does have a massive impact on all of those around you. And because as humans we do have an inbuilt negativity bias, we are programmed to focus on our weaknesses, what we can't do, what we're missing out on, all of that FOMO. So because of that, we do have to work extra hard to dial down the negativity bias and actually tune into what is still good in your world, despite whatever you're going through. And when Abby died, because I've been trained to think this way, I so remember I used to have this voice in my head that said, choose life, not death. Don't lose what you have to what you have lost. And we have two beautiful sons, and my husband and I, as a family, we were so determined to choose to focus our attention on the good that was still in our lives, and not just to, as you say, just completely get sucked into that negativity vortex of victimology and blame. So I think it is really important to observe and catch your conversations and consider what the impact might be on the recipient. Yeah, absolutely hear that, and thank you for that.
Mm. Dr. Lucy, I have two last questions for you for today. And the first question is about thinking. All right. So, my wife and I are on the quest to help people to improve their ability to think because we believe that our thinking capability actually decreasing, not increasing. And every chance that we talk to experts like you are, we would love to pick your brains on this topic and have you share the insights so that people can reflect, can think, and can learn and can improve their ability to think. So the question for you, Dr. Lucy, is how have you been helping yourself to expand your own ability to think?
So, in creating our new cohort-based course, which is called A Better Way to Grieve, I have been talking to lots of bereaved people. So I posted on LinkedIn the other day to say that I was creating the course, but I was really mindful that I have my own idea of what might be useful for the students in that course, but my way of expanding my thinking was to make sure that I've done some one-on-one calls with them to check the pulse of where they're at and what would be most useful for them. So I think that is, yeah, you really do raise a very important point. We need to think about our thinking, and that is my one way recently of expanding my thinking beyond my own individual bias bubble to make sure that I was hearing external voices and to know that I was creating the course that was most relevant to the outcomes that they were holding dear.
So you invited people feedbacks and stuff like that, so that they can help you to adjust,
shape it,
shape it again. Okay, thanks for sharing that. And we traveled time back at the beginning, right? So now we're gonna travel to the future. So we knew you when you were young, want to be international inventor, love sports, and move your family to New Zealand. We knew the tragedy that happened, the legacy that you were working on to from that, and last year alone you training over 30,000 people. So it's on average it's about 80 to 90% a day. That's a lot of training. So we're gonna
that sounds exhausting.
I know. We're gonna head into the future a little bit here, Dr. Lucy. Is there anything that exciting and you are working on you want to share with us now so we can celebrate with you in advance?
Yes, so the most exciting thing I'm working on at the moment is this new short course for the bereaved called A Better Way to Grieve. But I have also been talking to my publishers in New York this morning, and we're going to do an updated version of Resilient Grieving for next year, for 2023. But I'm even more excited to say that I'm going to work on another book for them about what does it mean to have been grieving for 10 years, to have lost our daughter 10 years ago, and what has been the long-term impact on that? And so how has that shaped the direction of our lives, and how can readers learn to create a lasting legacy of the people that they have lost and loved? Because that is the kind of central work that you need to do when you're grieving, is to effectively draw what has happened into the big story, the big picture of your life. So I've always been interested in how Abby's loss will affect us, in years and across the lifespan, because it's such a big thing to lose a child. And so I'm not saying that I've been crying for the last 8 years, because I haven't, but I would like to write. I'd like to take some time to think about what the last 10 years have taught me. It will be 10 years by the time I write this book. Because I think that is, when you lose someone you love, particularly for parental bereavement, that is the big question that bereaved parents ask me, is what was the long-term impact on Abby's loss, on your family and your relationship and your own life. So that will be the big project that will come in further down the track in another couple of years' time.
Thanks for sharing that, Dr. Lucy. That definitely will be a book of interest to many, many people because it also shows how we can, what we could do, and at the same time, we look at it as a way for treasuring what we are having at the moment, try to hold dear to the people that we are loving while we can, right? And that's important. But thanks a lot for joining our show and sharing your stories with a lot of insights and amazing thing that you've been doing. I'm sure that the hashtag Debbie, Abby will, would have loved this. Definitely will, like. Thanks, Dr.
Thank
Lucy.
you.
Yeah.
I've so enjoyed being with you and all of your listeners. I really appreciate the work that you and your wife do. And so thank you for inviting me along today.
Thanks for joining. I look forward to seeing you in Vietnam one day. All right.
Yes, and in the meantime, I look forward to seeing everybody on LinkedIn and Instagram, where you can just go and search Dr. Lucy and come and follow our work there, because when we can't all be together physically, it is great to be able to share our work and connect with so many people on those platforms, isn't it? That's how you and I met.
I know.
And so I do say to your listeners, do come and follow me on LinkedIn and on Instagram, and let me know, what you need to know and how we can help you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Dr. Lucy. We need to say goodbye to you now, and we love to bring you back to another time and talk. When you're ready for your next book or so, you'll share with us more about that. Okay?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If I might just put you a couple of links in the direct message on LinkedIn as well of our courses so that people can find more of our work.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay.
Right, well, it's so nice to meet you, and I really appreciate the interest you have shown in my work, and keep up the great work, you two.
Thank you.
Send my love to your wife.
Thank you very much. Yes, my wife said hello to you from Ho Chi Minh City also.
Oh, she's just there. Yeah. Yes, okay, well, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.